And after the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll be doing a brief moment of silence in recognition of tomorrow being the 17th anniversary of 9/11/2001. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can be seated. All right. Welcome to the regular school committee meeting of Monday, September 10th, 2018. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. At this time, we'll turn it over to both our student advisory council representatives for our Round Attleboro update. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you. I'm going to remain seated for this one since the both of us are here today. This is Jen. Jen's new. Some of you guys might know Jen. Some better than others, probably. And we're glad to have her on the team. She's replacing Dan Perry from last year, and we'll be here for the year to represent the Attleboro Public Schools student body at these meetings. Give a little insight on kind of what you're into, class councils and stuff.
Yeah, so I am part of the senior class council. I'm the treasurer this year. I'm really involved with Best Buddies at the high school and with the new Student Ambassadors Club that's starting up this year. So
Psyched
very
about
exciting.
that.
Yeah.
So we got a little slideshow, which we're going to run through real quick. Just kind of start of the year, Attleboro Public School kind of stuff. Point it here. No. Computer. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Back one. Okay. So all elementary schools was being specific at first with dates and stuff, but they're pretty much all having their back to school nights, curriculum nights, and their open houses, their book fairs. I think Willett is having their barbecue at the start of the year this year, and I'm not sure if that's for every elementary school, but I know that it always terrified me every year when I went to Willett, so I figured I'd note that just because I think it's good in the long run for students to experience that, but I don't know, it's a little dreadful, especially at the start of the year. So that's elementary schools.
So up next is middle schools. You have picture days happening, which I always didn't like. You got to make sure your outfit's looking nice. And then you have some scattered half days, and then Brennan specifically has Arthur Flanagan coming, and that's going to be on September 24th. And then there's also some PTO meetings happening, and that's a great way for new parents to kind of get involved with the school scene and see what's going on in there.
Yeah. High school, back to school night. My dad will be there for sure. And then senior parent night, which my dad will also be at, but with me. So that'll be fun to experience. Looking forward to it. And then class council meetings for the high school start up this week. So every class is kind of gonna get their ball rolling. Except for the seniors though, just because we're kind of on top of our game this year. So we've already had ours. So we're not actually starting this week. And then the first SAC meeting and student council meeting is also this week, which we're looking forward to this Thursday night. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in our SAC slide. And then our community engagement slide is not actually updated yet, but there's one thing on there actually.
Yeah, so I mentioned the student ambassadors a little bit earlier. So that's a new club this year, and it kind of started last year, but this year they're really establishing it as its own thing, and it's just high school students basically volunteering for citywide events. And so like I said, it's new this year, and it's a great way for new students and returning students to just get involved and kind of volunteer more out in the city outside of the school.
Yeah. And I can definitely speak to it a little bit. I'm not personally involved, but a lot of my friends are. And it's really great because the students that get chosen for it are students that, it's not like the same students that are in, the high positions and, involved in their class councils and student councils. They kind of look deeper into the student population to find kids that are, maybe less involved and reach out to them and say, hey, here's this opportunity. Would you like to do this? And a lot of the kids that are in it are kids that really aren't involved in any other way. And it's a great start for them, and it's good for them to get, involved in stuff, especially something so, important, to be involved in the school system and the citywide events. So it's really cool. And then finally, for SAC, a new member, Jen. So as of right now, there's 2 members in SAC. Hopefully after Thursday, when we have our first meeting after student council, we will have some more to back us up. Some new recruits this year, which is going to be fun, and we're going to discuss some of our plans for this year and They will probably be somewhat centered around the year of the student action, which is kind of the theme for this year, coming off of last year of the student voice, I think. So we're really looking forward to this next year with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you both. Look forward to seeing you in future meetings, and thank you very much. And next, we have an introduction. Superintendent Sawyer, turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to invite up Robert Bonier and Yvonne Medeiros, our special ed director. Mr. Rooney would have liked to have been here this evening, but he had to attend to something else. So I certainly sense his good wishes for this occasion.
So, good evening.
Good evening.
So I want to thank first start off by thanking the interview team, which in addition to Bill and myself, consisted of Jean Hickox at the high school, Lori Santarpio, our team chair at the high school, and Jennifer Merrick, the school adjustment counselor for the network program. We spent some time reviewing, developing our questions, kind of looking at what were we looking for in the next director for the network. Robbie quickly rose to the top. She has extensive experience in public day programming. She spent over 20 years at Bi-County Collaborative, started as a paraprofessional, moved to a teacher position, and in the last 17 years, oversaw the public day program there, which is the equivalent of our network program. It's at BICO, it's a middle school and high school program. She grew and developed that. So we were really impressed, obviously, with her experience, her development of a program, kind of what we were looking for. But we were really, impressed with, she's an Attleboro resident, her relationships in the community, not just in Attleboro, but in the surrounding communities, the partnerships to develop, particularly for the kids' needs there. Her experience, as you know, Network is a public day program. Those students come with, it's our most intensive program here in Attleboro for special education. The students there come with significant needs and challenges that are very different from many of our other programs. Her experience with that type of student, that type of population was very impressive and quickly rose to the top from the candidates. So for the thing that impressed us the most was her belief that all students can be successful, which really aligned with our mission and vision here in Attleboro. So I'm pleased to welcome, as I know Bill is, and the Attleboro and the high school team, Robbie to the Attleboro Public Schools.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for having me here. I can't say enough about the city and being part of the city now. It's like a homecoming for me in a way, being able to work for this district. From the interview process right through to my 2 weeks at the Leadership Academy working with administration, I'm so impressed with the current administration, the strategic design. I did take some time to read through the strategic design, and this is a place that I really do want to work. And I'm very proud to be able to lead the school that has our students who need an alternative setting. And I'm hoping that we can keep more kids in our district and have them be more included. One of the missions and one of the themes of the Leadership Academy was inclusive practices, was also engaging all students, and I'm very proud to be here, and I thank you all very much.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
I just
Mrs.
want
Hill?
to say welcome back.
Thank
I was thrilled to see your name there. I think you'll be a great asset to the district because you know the system, and you are definitely dedicated and committed to helping to serve that population.
Thank you.
So I'm thrilled to have you back.
So I'll just echo Mrs. Scales and say welcome. Look forward
Thank
to
you very
working
much.
with you, and I know you're dedicated to the school and the students. So thank you for taking on this challenge, and look forward to working with you. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Sawyer, business report, superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to invite up my team to assist in our updates of various issues across the district. I'd like to first by just talking about the concept of an opening. You know, as I have spent now 6 years up at central office, my appreciation for the nature of a school opening has really deepened, and I have, again, a new appreciation for just how much of what's necessary to make that successful is invisible to most of us. You know, running a school district, it's a complicated enterprise, and to go from one day having our schools being largely empty to the next day having thousands of people in them is not something that is easy to accomplish. It's quite a challenge, and certainly it's a challenge for any district, but a district of this size. The scale of the operation brings many challenges. So, and you know, I liken it to, you know, what we're being asked to do with, you know, a first day is basically something that's large and complicated. We're being asked to treat it like it's a light switch, right? Like it's off one moment and then it's on the next. And anything that requires the coordination of thousands of people is prone to have some difficulties. So I don't think we will ever have an opening that doesn't have specific issues that we have to work through. That's, I think, going to always be part of a school opening, but we do endeavor to not have systemic problems or problems that repeat themselves year in and year out. And we've been working very hard to do that. And it's my perspective, both from what I've observed on my own, but also the kind of feedback I've received both from educators across the district and from parents that I've spoken to, that we had a, you know, heat issues aside, we had a strong opening to school. In fact, you know, it probably, half days aside, was the smoothest that we've had in my time at central office. You know, I've witnessed what this district looks like when some of our basic systems don't work right out of the gate. And, you know, we were absent people running around with their hair on fire this August because, you know, a lot has gone into addressing the things that got in the way in the past. So I thought we had a very strong opening. Certainly not without things that we need to work on, but a good start, to be sure. So obviously the biggest obstacle that we faced right out of the gate was the extreme heat that we experienced. And I just wanted to say a couple things about all of that, because certainly it was a, excuse the pun, hot topic. First and foremost, we publish an academic calendar. We do that, you know, in the winter. You approve a calendar, we put it out for everybody to see so that everybody who's involved can use that to plan ahead. And there are lots of people who use that to plan, obviously. The people that we work with, things that were done internally, but also families, of course, use that calendar to plan. They understand that, you know, those are the 180 days that they can count on us to have the kids with us, so that if they have daycare concerns about when kids are not in school, that those will be able to, they'll need to address those for the days that we're not going to be in school. And so for that reason, we have a responsibility as a district to conduct school as much as we can to the schedule that we publish for people, right? We take that responsibility very, very seriously. And so I know when people look at, you know, the decisions we make, you know, sometimes it's not clear why we do certain things. So I have to say that, like, you know, the first principle, the first thing that we're operating from is if we said we're going to have school today, then we're going to do everything we can to have school today, because I understand that when we don't have school, or when we dismiss and have partial days, and that's unexpected, that puts a real hardship on working families, and people have to scramble and make arrangements, and that's not something that we do lightly. It'll always be the case that when we can bring kids in and have a full day of school, that's exactly what we're going to do, and it requires you know, real extraordinary circumstances for us to do something else. And of course, you know, the one circumstance that often causes us to do something else is concerns about safety. And so that's, like, you know, the one thing that will always be a reason why
as much as this is going to be inconvenient for people, perhaps, that's something we're going to all have to deal with, because we don't want to put kids in situations where we are not comfortable with. So, specifically with the heat that we dealt with, first I should let you know that there are no regulations around heat. Unlike cold, right? There are regulations that say that we must keep our classrooms at least 66 degrees, and anything less than that, we have to do something about that. There's no such regulations around heat. We've done quite a bit of research, and from our position, we think that 88 degrees is a good threshold by which to try to make decisions about classrooms. And that's not to say that a classroom that's 89 degrees is unsafe. In fact, one of the reasons why there are no regulations around heat is because, for the most part, high temperatures are a matter of comfort, not safety. But in our particular case, there are some aspects of this that you have to be concerned about. One, high temperatures, and these are temperatures we're talking about in the 90s, they can pose threats to vulnerable populations. And, one of the vulnerable populations that you have to worry about are small children. We're talking about under the age of 5. And while, we don't have those in every building, we do have buildings with kids that young, and so we have to be concerned about that. But also, as you go up in temperature, you have to be worried about whether or not everybody is going to be able to physically handle those. And then another aspect of that we're very concerned about is air quality. When it's not only hot, but there's high humidity, the environmental conditions in some of our buildings, the high school and Willet in particular, lead to environmental conditions that we don't think are healthy, because there's not enough air moving in the classrooms for what we would consider to be a healthy situation. And that is why we had to take the unprecedented actions that we did at the start of the year. And, I think as that's now, I think we're moving past that. Cross my fingers that we don't have another heat wave, which is not impossible, but less likely with each day. We're going to have to, what are the takeaways of that experience that we've had? One of them is that we're probably going to be experiencing more periods of high temperatures in the future, right? This August was the hottest August on record. And so, these kinds of, increasing records lead us to believe that we're going to need to do some planning. Now, the high school takes care of itself with the new building, which will be air conditioned. 5 of our buildings are already air conditioned. So that leaves us with 3 buildings that there really isn't, a plan in place to address them. Now, with one of our buildings, Thatcher, the chiller in that building needs to be addressed. And so through that plan, we could, without much difficulty, expand how much air conditioning that building has to improve the quality of the situation there. But that will still leave Studley and Willett that we're going to have to address as a school district if we do not want to face the kinds of situations that we did at the start of school. So as a district, I think that's something that we're going to really have to talk about and think about, especially as we plan our submission to the city for the capital improvement plan for the coming year. Because if the expectation is that we're not going to put kids into extreme heat situations, and if people want the kids to be in school on the days that we say we're going to have school, well, then the only way to make that happen is to air condition the building. Because in this region of the country, when you have a 180-day school year, it doesn't matter where you start it or where you stop it. Part of the school year is always going to exist during a period of time in which temperatures like we experienced are possible, right? You can get 90-degree temperatures anywhere starting in May. And as somebody who worked at Attleboro High School, I mean, there were times in May when we had 90-degree temperatures. And certainly June is susceptible to those high heats. And then, late August and September are obviously as well. So, you can't put your calendar in such a way that you can be safe from ever having to deal with this. So I think one of the big takeaways is that we need to plan. Another takeaway is that another thing that was unprecedented in the way we handled things was, for the first time, I think to my knowledge, we planned ahead to have early dismissal in buildings, but not all of our buildings, right? We've dismissed buildings, we've dismissed a building during a school day due to an emergency. That's a thing that's happened multiple times over my 20 years. Most recently, I think, was the need to do so at Coelho in 2016. There was a water main break. We had to evacuate the building because the building didn't have water. I think that's the most recent time we did that. So, the idea that, okay, you have a problem in a building, we got to send all the kids home, that's not unheard of. But the idea that the day before we would choose to tell families at some schools but not others, you're going to have a half day tomorrow because of the conditions in your building, I don't think we've done that before. And one of the concerns around that, one of the reasons why we've never quite done that, is around transportation. So the idea that 4 of our elementary schools would get out at one time, but the 5th would get out at a different time, that was something that we had never done before, and we had to test whether or not we'd be able to do that, and we did. So it's good for us to know that perhaps we can think about a wider range of options in dealing with some of these problems moving forward. And then the final one is just that I would like to report back to you that the buildings themselves said that an unintended benefit of all this is that the first day of school for almost every building was as seamless as it's ever been, and that they wanted us to know that there was something to the half day as the first day, given how those days are often largely operational in nature. And so that's something that we will talk about and think about moving forward, but a unexpected lesson from the experience. So that's my summary of that decision, and hopefully we'll get a couple months before we have to cancel anything again. Did you?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the difference in temperatures at the schools with the last day that was only Willett and...
As I alluded to, we have 9 buildings. Well, actually we have more than that, but for the simplicity of this discussion, let's talk about the 9 major buildings. 5 of them are fully air conditioned. Temperatures in those buildings were fine, and that's like one group of buildings. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Willett and the high school, which have virtually no air conditioning. Certainly, there are offices that are air conditioned. There are a couple spaces within them, so I don't want to say no air conditioning, but not nearly enough air conditioned space to accommodate moving large groups of kids around to keep them out of the heat. It's also the case that for whatever reason, and there are reasons why this is the case, these buildings heat up faster than our other buildings, and they cool down slower. So when we have a stretch of time, the heat at the start of the day is already worse in those buildings than the other buildings, which contributes to higher temperatures later in the day as well, because they're starting from a higher temperature. So then you put the kids in the room, and it really, really gets cooking. And these are brick buildings, and again, those 2 buildings are particularly sensitive to that. And they have the experience in those buildings is to feel like you're actually in a brick oven. And so those buildings are the ones that are our biggest concern, because not only are the temperatures there significantly higher. I mean, we had readings on the worst of it, over 100 degrees in some classrooms. But through this all, significantly high readings in the mid 90s. So that's one group of schools that are very similar in terms of the experience we have there. The middle group is Thatcher and Studley, where there's air conditioning in the building in large areas, not necessarily all the classrooms. In fact, many classrooms are not air conditioned. But because the large areas of the building are air conditioned, at night that air conditioning is running and that cold air is pumping through the building, which helps to cool those buildings down more at nighttime, so that you start off the day at a lower temperature in the first place. but they also do not heat up as quickly as the other ones. And so the temperatures we were experiencing at Studley and at Thatcher were, significantly lower. We're talking in the, like at Thatcher, we're looking last week on the day that they had a full day, but Willett had a half day. The temperatures in the building were in the high 70s to mid 80s. And, I want to be very clear here. Sitting in a classroom that's, 84 degrees is miserable. Those are not good learning conditions. No one thinks that that's an optimal situation. But one of the things that we've talked about is that as a district, we have temporarily suboptimal conditions, with some regularity. It is not uncommon for a system to go down and for a group of people in a building to have a situation that isn't necessarily pleasant. And we deal with that all the time, and this is one of those cases. So it really comes down to, is it uncomfortable or is it unsafe? And, we have to make that distinction as best we can, and we did in this case. We felt like last week, Willett and the high school were unhealthy, and therefore we needed to do something. And those buildings don't have air-conditioned spaces to move kids out of 95-degree classrooms to get a respite from that. Whereas at Thatcher and Studley, which had rooms that were uncomfortable, also had areas that were cooler that you could move kids to give them a break. And the temperatures that they were dealing with were significantly less than the temperatures at the buildings that we had the half days, which is why, even though it was uncomfortable there, we did have school there. Because back to first principles, when we can have school, we're going to, right? So, for the families that were counting on us, we had school in as many places as we could. And I would just remind families that, whether or not to send your kids to school on any given day is always a personal decision. If a family doesn't feel like the conditions, knowing how the building is, are such that they feel like that's what's best for them, if their child has asthma and they're concerned about, the air quality or all those kinds of things, families are always welcome to make the decision to keep their kids home on a specific day. It's no different than what we tell people when we have snow or other emergencies.
Mr. Geddes?
Thank you for the explanation. I did have a conversation with a parent that admitted to me that they were frustrated and thought it was ridiculous that we were closing some schools, but then on one of the cooler days was in one of the buildings and said it was atrocious. And so there was that understanding, that firsthand experience. But I think it's critical to point out that everything you're talking about related to conditions are conditions inside the building. This is not a general, because I've heard the generalization that, it's hot outside, so we're not going to send the kids to school, we're not going to take them in. It wasn't a matter of temperatures outside, it was a decision exclusively based on conditions inside the building. So I think that's important for families to realize, because even on those days, like you said, when you were teaching on a 90-degree day in May at the high school, the day before that probably wasn't 90 degrees, and so it didn't get as warm, and the condition inside the building wasn't as awful.
Well, I would like to say that this district has kept full days of school for students in 95-degree situations, up until now. Like
Right.
This occasion, we veered off of what has been historically the case.
Right.
But that is in response to, I think, changing attitudes about our responsibility in those circumstances, right?
Exactly.
Again, there have been plenty of days in which Attleboro High School remained open in the kinds of conditions that we experienced at the start of school. It's happened over my career. I know of several occasions when that's been the case. The question is, was that really the right thing to do?
Right.
It's certainly easier, right? Like, listen, there's nothing easier than just going ahead and just letting the day go, right? Everything that goes into the dismissal is quite an undertaking. So in the end, it's about doing what we think is right, and I think that's partly because people have been appropriately asking, why are we asking students to endure these conditions?
Mr. Quinn?
So it seems like, is there a bucket of two schools that seem to be the major problems? AHS, which is going to be resolved shortly. But then Willett is in that other bucket. The constituent reached out, suggested that part of the challenge is that the school was designed to have air conditioning, but for whatever reason wasn't put in, and the design was done in such a way that it limited the cross ventilation.
So, I'll let Mr.
That's
Furtado
true,
take it.
yeah. The air conditioning was taken out because of the budget issues
But in the renovation, not the
in
original.
the
building.
renovation.
Correct.
And the original building was built at a time when I don't think it was intended to have air conditioning.
Right, but I guess the thought was that
But in the renovation, it was definitely taken out.
it was taken out. So I guess the other question is there any way to, short of air conditioning in the building, to alleviate this either through window design or anything along those lines? Because it seems like it's going to be a perpetual problem. Or is it just one of those things where the best course of action seems to be keeping that on the capital improvement plan? I guess the long story short, what's the long-term fix for this?
You know, it took quite a while to get what we got for the library media center over there
Yep.
in terms of cooling. However, with the new high school coming up, we may have some ways to take a look at that. You know, we either through the city or through performance contracts, which we're proposing to the city for the other buildings that are in dire need of having their systems revamped. So I think prospects are much better than they have been in the past for that building in particular. That is a concern. We've already done a film program at the building, so we're putting film on the windows to radiate heat back, the sunlight back out. But that just addresses the glass. That does not address the bricks, which are really a huge problem over there.
Yeah, I just think for our purposes, it's something that we shouldn't forget in the grand scope of things, because this is an issue that's going to pop up, particular advocacy, and then to your point, Mr. Superintendent, as I joked with you, anybody who has an issue with you releasing students early are invited to come and work out of any of those classrooms in the afternoon, so they can experience it firsthand. So I commend you and your team for your communication strategy and putting the best interest of the students first.
How long was that on the capital improvements list at Willett?
For as long as I've been here. At least 12, probably more years.
I mean, maybe, my oldest is in 4th grade at Willett, so since I've been there every year, there's been an issue with heat, either in, like Mr. Sawyer said, either in June or in September, even when we're starting after Labor Day. There's always an issue with heat every year there. And, the argument is always that, well, it's only a month or so a year, so why are we going to spend money on it? But I think if it gets worse every year, we need to continue to push this forward, because in this day and age, we shouldn't have schools where we have to send kids home because we don't have air conditioning, is my opinion. Scott?
Well, first off, I want to echo some of our colleagues here who have spoken. I am 100% in support of the decisions that were made to start the school year. And maybe there was an unintended good consequence of having the half days. It could give pause to maybe starting off the year that way, a good transition back in. But I think it was the right decision to make. I heard from a lot of parents on both sides of the aisle. I actually did research. For folks who thought that they once attended a school in those types of heat conditions, they really didn't, because we rarely have gone to school at the end of August. That's a more recent adjustment in the schedule. And on top of that, with the heat index being what it was, I mean, we were being advised to check on our elderly, whether family or neighbors. So not even just a case, Chairman, of not having air conditioning, just the quality of the air itself is not healthy. So I couldn't
have been in more agreement, and I made those sentiments known to anybody who spoke to me. I did get a lot of questions though, because people want to start trying to figure out how they can improve things, right? And people started challenging, like, well, why are we going back to school before Labor Day? And I understand some of the reasoning, because we don't want to be running up until the end of June in the school year, whether it's heat or just the end of a long school year. But a lot of parents have asked, and I thought, since I'm here, I am obligated to raise the issue as to whether or not this district has ever considered the idea of maybe shortening the vacation week schedules in the February and April timeframe to like condense it down to one, so that even whether you started the year after Labor Day or kept that schedule, it is still shortening up the June timeframe. And I know other school districts have made that switch, and I don't know if we've ever had that here, and I don't know if that's ever something to consider. But that was a lot of questions that were being asked, because why not have kids in the school at a time where you know it's not going to be too hot to go to school, versus probably a lot of other scheduling reasons that parents were asking that question.
Yeah, so it is something that we have discussed in this room, and we fully anticipate that this will be a topic as we set the calendar for next year. So we will come prepared to give our best thinking on this and to give as much information as we can so that we can make the best decision for the district.
I appreciate that. I know that that's not something that can just be easily done. There's a lot of steps that would be taken one way or the other. Thank you for your answer.
My recollection is we looked into it at least a little bit a couple years ago, the year that we were,
2015.
was it 2015 when we were
Yep.
thinking we might have to, is that when we ended up going to school on Good Friday?
Yes.
I think we're off about most of February that time frame.
Yeah.
We had a lot of snow that year.
Mr. Larson?
I know in the last couple of years, the lab has looked at that issue quite a bit. And, until you really start thinking about it, one of the issues that came up, and until we started really talking with the teachers and some of the parents and the rest of it, you don't realize how many of the teachers here in the district have spouses that either teach in this district or a different district and may live in a third district where their children go to school. So trying to coordinate possibly mom's schedule with the district that dad sometimes works in, and the kids could be in a third district. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's going to be that, but I mean, one of the challenges that came up very quickly was, what you would really need to do is to have like 9 or 10 communities all get together and decide, okay, we're going to go from 2 to 1, and we're all going to do it like as a county or a larger area, just because the impact that you have indirectly on so many different families, because they could be in so many different districts, really became the challenge that, we got to a point where it was like, okay, this is a little ahead of us. And so there are going to be, not that it can't be revisited, but there are definitely some challenges in analyzing it.
I guess I just have a kind of a clarifying question. So, as representative of the students at our high school, I feel it's myself and Jen's duty to represent students not only that are in schools now and in what their specific grades, but students that will be coming into in the future in these coming years, mainly coming in before the new high school. So, I think so. It's quick for me to understand how we can say that the heat situation for this year and the coming, correct me if I'm wrong, 5 years before the students will actually be in the new high school, 2023?
For 2022.
4 years, okay. Are solved because there's a new high school, but the gap between now and then, the 4 years, do you think the same approach would be taken if we have, similar circumstances, or do you think it would,
So you're absolutely right. We can't just wait till new building to save us, right? Which is why we took, again, unprecedented action. What we did certainly reveals what, I and my administration think was the right approach. And so unless there's reason to change the way we think about it, I think people could anticipate more of the same. But, the school district belongs to the citizens of Attleboro, right? We serve the families in Attleboro, and so if they feel strongly in one direction or the other, then we're going to, in time, plan to get in line with what the sentiment in the community is. If it's a divided sentiment, as it is on, lots of issues, then we're going to work with the school committee to arrive at what we collectively think is best. So I will continue to advocate for not putting students in the situation that they were facing on the days that we had half days, because I just I don't see how it's defensible. But that'll always be an ongoing conversation.
Oh, yeah, Ms. Johnson.
Yes. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit regarding the school opening and talk about the road construction. So the last time we met, we had discussed about what would we do if the construction ran over, what type of backup plans we might have. And I know that there were some challenges, some were unforeseen, and I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit to what were maybe some of the main challenges and what were some of the takeaways, and what did we learn from those challenges.
So we've already reached out to the city to discuss how we can improve communication, so that we're not left in the situation we were that morning. But I have to say that on any given morning, we wake up to a water main break or an accident, or there are always going to be conditions that affect traffic in the city, and we certainly have methods to work through that and do our best to get around it. It certainly was quite quite an arrival on that first day at Wamsutta. Ms. Regan and I were both on our way there, and I sat parked on Oak Hill Ave for 10 minutes without moving. So I can attest firsthand that it was a tough situation. But then we also went to Hyman Fine next, where we saw those buses that were delayed by all that arriving on time. So, we were able to make adjustments and continue the day. And in this case, that arrival was deeply impacted by the traffic caused by the road work. But by 8 o'clock, it was completed, and for dismissal, it wasn't a problem, and it wasn't a problem the next day. So for me, the only real thing that I wanted to address, because again, this could happen any day, anywhere, and just as long as we're good at working around that, which again I think on that day we were, it really comes down to, okay, should we have known and been able to get ahead of it better than we did? And I think there's reason to believe that that's true. And so, we want to work with our valued partners in the city to make sure that we have as much notice as we can.
Thank you.
Ms. Larson?
To that end, I had a conversation with a gentleman who was very remorseful about interfering with our operations, because that was certainly not his plan. And being in a situation where he is very understanding to what our needs were going to be that day, took it very personally that they were not out of our way in a timely manner. So,
Yeah, I mean, listen, as someone who also is in charge of a large city or operation, I have great sympathy for having good intentions and not necessarily always hitting it right on the head. So I think it's understandable that we try our best, and sometimes we fall a little bit short. But yeah, we just have to work through, when that happens, what do we do about it?
Mhm.
And we're going to continue to work on that.
Mrs. Doris?
You said that you've reached out to the city to try to prevent something like this in the future. What are you hoping would be the outcome of that? Like, what kind of communication would you hope you would be receiving?
So if we had known that that road work would be going on right there at that time. We could have at least warned families before they left to seek alternate routes. You know, not to all get trapped on Oak Hill Ave. That, I mean, would have helped a little bit, but other than that, you know, honestly, so much of life is managing expectations. You have a reasonable expectation that when you get in your car to drop off your kid at school, that you're going to be able to drive there. You know, there'll be a little bit of traffic because everyone's going there, but you'll go and you'll drop them off and then you'll leave. When all of a sudden you're in a parking lot, that can, especially people who again are on a tight time frame. They got to get someplace else. They got to make a train. They got to get to work. It can be very frustrating. And so, as much as that's going to be a problem for them either way, I find that when people expect something that's going to be a problem for them, that goes better than when it hits them out of the blue.
So scheduling wise, could this have been prevented on the other side?
Oh, I did.
Like could have been scheduled
I can't comment on that.
But is it safe to say that ideally we would be part of the discussion process beforehand in regard to scheduling, so that way we could give input?
Well, we did. We were in conversations. We were concerned about that outcome.
Oh, okay. So there was a discussion.
And there was every
beforehand.
intention to not have it play out the way it did.
Got it. And those discussions are common?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a great relationship. It just didn't go quite the way it should have that day.
Understand.
I think that was equipment failure. That wasn't a scheduled situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the rest of my team to give you some updates on various topics from around the district. So we'll start with Mr. Furtado. We'll talk about operations.
Thanks. We have some good news and some bad news with transportation. I thought the transition into the new year went very, very smoothly. We haven't had a lot of complaints in terms of bus arrivals. Buses have been on time. We have one problematic bus that's kind of a Studley Quello thing that we're working on right now, but other than that, it's been very good. We're not aware of missing students, missing stops. That all happened very fluidly on the first day of school. We are managing a very high volume, relatively speaking, to the past, of late fee-for-service registrations. We had over 200 from August 1st to August 24th, and we've had over 120 since August 24th, which is a very unusual number. Very difficult to manage when you're trying to make sure that students are on buses and getting to school. So that first group, August 1st to August 24th, we did get placed on buses as of last week. The second group, since August 24th, we're still trying to manage to get on buses. So we understand the frustration parents have of having no access to the bus at this point, but it's just impossible for us to do real-time bus registration at the end of August when school's starting. The buses have their cameras that work, 5 cameras per bus, which allows us to also see the front of the bus. So when we have disputes about the bus arm being out, cars going through the bus arm, we have visibility to those things. Also, in a terrible event of an accident, we have that visibility as well in terms of liability if we need that. The scanner program has been delayed by a software component on Bloom's side, which was installed last week. So we're hoping for great news this week. We haven't heard it yet, but that should start up very, very soon, and that will be followed immediately by the application the parents can download, which will tell them, A, that their child has gotten on the bus, and B, where the bus is at any given time. We have about 8 concerns right now regarding bus stops and safety, which we're starting to address. Other than that, that's sort of the transportation story.
Mr. Quinn, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, I know that there's been a large shift in enrollment. Number of students has increased. I'm kind of curious about that bucket of the late enrollments. You know, if you had to break it down into, and it's okay if you don't have those numbers right now, how much of this is due to students who are just new to the district, so therefore we're coming in towards that end of the bus enrollment? How many of it is students who are now taking the bus for the first time? And then, you know, what percentage would fall into that bucket of, took the bus last year but was late to register? I'm trying to get a sense of what's like kind of driving.
Yeah, I
this
think,
spike.
you know, we did more advertising, we had more night hours, we did all, you know,
Yep.
more of all those things, and ended up actually worse off than last year, but, I'll give you percentages, I can look at the data, but, just by looking at the, applications, a great deal are kind of late high school folks, which would suggest, that they've had an interaction with the system before and understand the parameters and just didn't get it done. We do have a significant number of new elementary school people as well.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, it's a large chunk of this is high school students who are or families that are now, and I'm wondering, you know, maybe one of the charges for the student advisory council is try to figure out, you know, talking to students, you know, what we can do to better communicate to those families or helping them to make that decision a little bit sooner, if that seems to be where that frustration, because that's hard on your department, but also hard on those families who are trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
And
it's a terrible situation for everybody.
maybe getting the student perspective can, you know, from freshmen can help out with that.
Regarding facilities.
One second,
I'm
Mr. Tyler, sorry, Mr.
So,
Stewart.
in regard to the high school,
Yeah.
as a parent of somebody who used to take the bus at the high school, he doesn't need to anymore, luckily, but what was the communication avenues that we took to communicate with parents of students who we expected to need
Right,
buses?
we had hard copy stuff that went home, as well as, you know, the high school principal does a great job sort of pumping out information through a variety of means, whether it be social media or direct email. He does that, you know, more frequently than anybody in the district, so.
Hard copy, are we talking mailings, or are we talking end of year last year?
End of year last year, because again, registration started in April, so it was sort of April to the end of June. As well as the high school's correspondence with parents all through the summer and then into the start of the year.
Okay. Can talk more offline.
Thank you.
Facilities, the heat did impact our facilities. We had a air conditioning unit at Studley go down this past week where the hot day happened. We had some strong concerns at Thatcher that didn't come to fruition, thankfully. And we did have a kind of shut-off failure down at Quello for about an hour during one of the hot days. But other than that, the buildings held up nicely with the heat. We have some work still to do on some things, particularly the network situation over at Finberg, and by network I mean the internet network. The network work at the high school for the spring standardized testing is going quite well. The computers are already on site. That's sort of ahead of schedule. We've installed the visitors systems and are already looking to expand that a little bit. We still have we repaired that major steam failure over by the music room that was in the paper last year. We have one more down by the SPED office, the special education office, that we need to address before the heating season kicks in, and we're not able to. We had a transition in landscaping services, and our new landscaper had a couple of bumps at the beginning, particularly with some fields at Quello that were going to be used for you know, adult softball and that, but other than that, the transition's been very smooth. We're very happy with the outcome so far. We have a proposal we'll be bringing to finance at the beginning of October regarding the infrastructure here at the high school for copy machines. It's, you know, it's a funny kind of situation where we're going to have a new building and all new equipment, but the equipment here is basically failing en masse, and we're going to propose a kind of 4-year lease to bridge us from here to there, and we'll have that information for you at the next meeting. That would conclude my report, Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Geddes?
Mr. Furtado, with the leasing option, is there no way to, because I'm assuming a more permanent solution would be less expensive. Is there no way to work out a copying network that we could put in here temporarily and carry over to the new building?
The problem is, but when you, basically 4 years from now, those machines will be crying too.
Fair
You
point,
certainly
yeah.
you don't want to be in a position where you own those. We just want to buy what we're going to use and then go into the new building and be in a, better shape.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, so to discuss some teaching and learning issues, I'll turn it over to Ms. Regan.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So first on my list is central registration. To date, we've registered over 300 students. We started, the process was before our central registration, which started the week of July 23rd. So before that, we registered about 30 students. During central registration, we registered 115, which was a 3-week span where we had day and evening sessions available for parents to come and complete our registration. And after registration, so starting from August 13th to today, we've registered 160 students. So, total about 300. So since I've been here in this position and starting in 2016, we've registered about 300 students, and our enrollment consistently stays the same throughout. So last year when we ended the year in June, we had about 6,120 students, and September, as of today, we have about 180 students. So we have some increase, but pretty much it stays the same and then continues to remain the same throughout the year.
Mr. Geddes?
Would you say that of those 300, are most of those all completely new to the district, having just moved to the city, or is there a percentage of folks that have lived here and were not enrolled previously that have decided to enroll now, or?
Some of them are kindergarten families, but that number has increasingly gotten smaller throughout the year. We only had about 17 incoming kindergarten. The rest were all brand new students moving in. We had a couple students that came from other neighboring schools, but other than that, most of them are brand new.
Awesome. Thank you.
Just to finish up, to support what Mr. Furtado said earlier, about 60% of our new students enrolled are at the elementary level, 25% are at the middle school level, and about 15% are at the high school level.
Mr. Larson, do you have a question?
No, I just going along with the comment that you had made, I happened to come into central office the Monday before school started in the middle of the morning, and there were 7 children in the lobby at about 9:30, 2 days before school started, and I started shaking my head because I'm sitting on, okay, in 48 hours, we need to have them in a class, and they're here now. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm not sure what else we could have done, because I know there was an extra effort put into getting people earlier and the rest of it, and
I just had a quick question, and then Rob, I don't know if you were heading down that path, but it's probably a little too early in the year to know, like, from a charter standpoint, like, what the returns are? Is that, like, something that we would know by mid-October, or, like, I don't know, I think, is it the 1st? Is that kind of the magic date, October 1st?
October 1st is our students' data, yes. We can definitely research that information. I don't have that exact number right now.
I'm always curious, to see if we've brought more kids home.
Yeah, they're typically very reluctant to give us an enrollment, but they are required to report it to the state for January 1st. So we will have a hard number on January.
January 1st, okay, thank you.
We also had our first professional development day for staff on August 28th. Initial reports that we received were very positive. It was our first year of a true pathway where teachers remain in one specific area for 3 sessions and receive professional development points in that specific area. So it seems like we'll continue to do that moving forward. We also implemented a new professional development platform where teachers register for the course that they would like to take, and then we'll be able to track all of their professional development points and any course credit that they have moving forward within that platform. So that was positive as well. Within the first, we're in our second year of the ST Math rollout, so 2 schools were trained actually today and tomorrow, Hill Roberts and Thatcher, and we do have the grants from all 5 schools where they'll be receiving professional development and how to use the data that is from ST Math to support student instruction. We also finished training teachers in illustrative math, the 2 initial days for grades 7 and 8 and our special education teachers, and we're also doing a pilot at the middle school, so they had the opportunity to collaborate with some neighboring districts, and again, initial reports are pretty positive, seeing that they were able to learn different strategies to support problem solving and critical thinking in mathematics. Finally, our first community coalition is on Thursday. Be Heard will be meeting from 5 to 7:30 here in the Library and Media Center. Our plan is to continue to work on the action plan that we started last year and implement some of the initiatives that were developed with that team. And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time I'll ask Ms. Medeiros to tell us a little bit about special education.
So I'm going to start with ESY. We serviced a little bit over 260 students this year from pre-K through 12 plus. I want to thank the staff, families, and students. It's a little hot this summer, so we persevered through that. We were able, with the support of ACE-PAC, partner with the recreation department here in Attleboro, and we actually provided, they provided swim lessons to our middle school students. So we had the availability for 30 students to take swim lessons for a week. It was a great partnership. Feedback from their staff and from our staff and students was very positive on that. We hope to continue that next year and add some additional programming for student options. We also ended our ESY program with a showcase of student work up through 8th grade, where our families could come in and kind of take a look at the work that students were doing through ESY. So we always have room for improvement and growth, but overall feedback was pretty positive on the experience this year. As far as new classrooms, we've opened up a new classroom for Insights, our intensive autism program at Thatcher. We had a number of students transitioning from preschool to kindergarten and needed an additional classroom there. We also had a couple of transfer move-ins from other districts into Attleboro. We've expanded our Spark program at Thatcher from grades 1 and 2 to K to 2 this year, again to meet student needs. And here at the high school for grade 10, we're rolling out in one section of English and one section of math a co-teaching model, where a general ed English teacher and a general ed math teacher will be working with special ed teachers to kind of support our students in the general ed classroom versus a pull-out model here at the high school. At Network, at the new Network program at Finberg, we've had some great attendance of students with the support of the transportation department. Kind of shifted our transportation where kids are actually getting dropped off and picked up right at Finberg, and that's really impacted our attendance, which has been a really strong move over there. As far as move-ins, we have had 48 students move into with IEPs this year, up through this afternoon. 4 at the pre-K level, 3 at Otta District. Those are heavy-duty IEPs with intensive placements. Those were prior to April 1 move-ins. We were notified right at the March 28th, March 30th that they were coming, and we would be fiscally responsible for those 3 students. We had 6 move-ins at the high school, 2 just this afternoon, and 35 from K to 8. Comparable to last year, around this time, we had about 52, with a much larger move-in last year at the high school. We're not seeing that this year. Definitely seeing it down in our K-8s and preschool. As far as programming, our SSC social emotional behavioral program at Studley for grades 3 to 4, that is now full. We've had a number of move-ins into that program. Inclusion for Coelho is pretty much closed out. We're busing students that are coming in with inclusion IEPs at the middle school level to Wamsutter and Brennan due to the large numbers at Coelho currently. And as far as programming, we did have some changes. I've spent a lot of time over at ELC observing and supporting arrival and dismissal as we've improved security and making sure our students are safe over at ELC. And I want to commend that staff for some great work. On the first day, on Thursday, kids were in the classroom sitting down at 8:57, which was pretty impressive. For the little kids to come in. So it was really good to see. I observed dismissal on Friday afternoon when all of Thatcher was dismissing, and they did a really, really good job, and families were there waiting, kids were excited and ready to go. So I just wanted to acknowledge their work in making that happen. That concludes my report.
Mr. Goodes?
With the expansion of some of the programs you mentioned, it was due to numbers. I'm guessing those were numbers of new incoming students. The reason I ask, was there any reduction in terms of out-of-district placement, or did we just expand our out-of-district based on the last-minute folks?
So we only had one student move to a different district from out of district. So we lost a student, but we gained 3 students.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, and so to round out our work, Ms. Singer will talk a little bit about personnel.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So summer is always very busy for the HR department. It's our busiest season. One of the things this summer, we implemented a new hiring and onboarding system. So there was some learning curve with that, both internally and for applicants who then submitted paperwork all electronic. So exciting times, but a lot of energy put into that. Leading up to this school year, we had, just in terms of staffing, 2 non-renewals, 15 retirements, and 25 resignations. So we did a lot of recruiting, hiring, and onboarding this year for a total of 41 positions being hired into for the start of this school year. 5 out of that 41 were newly added positions, which speak to the increased enrollment both at the ELC and at the other levels that were spoken to earlier by Assistant Superintendent Regan and Ms. Medeiros. We still do have several vacancies for the start of the year, but 1 teaching position and several para positions, and then bus driver, bus monitor, kind of one-offs. But all in all, I feel comparative to last year, we're in a really good spot for the start of the school year for staffing.
Mr. Geddes?
And with the 5 new positions, I know in the past we've talked about different grade levels that are at or possibly above ideal capacities. Where are those concerns with all of the new positions?
So the 5 positions, 1 was a paraprofessional position at an elementary school. The other 4 were teaching positions. 1, as Ms. Madeira spoke to at the Insights at the in the ELC, 1 at Wamsutter Middle School, STEAM teacher at Wamsutter, and then 2 at the high school.
Okay. So are there any grade levels that we're especially concerned about in terms of class sizes right now, or?
So I was able to predict that
Yeah.
already, and we were able
With her crystal
to
ball.
make
I
some
know there was some
internal
anticipation.
changes prior to that, and we were able to alleviate some of the class sizes in that way first.
Awesome.
So I think moving on, hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that moving forward.
Excellent.
I
Thank you.
would just comment that, class sizes are high across the district. We have problems in every school, everywhere. But the team does a great job of strategically moving staff and hiring such that we don't let any one particular area get out of, much higher than sort of the general high numbers that we have across the district.
Right. It's not good anywhere, but it's
Yes,
not
but
worse
it's-
anywhere anymore
yes,
either.
it's equitable.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes our update on the start of school. I'd just like to say that if you accept my assessment that our ability to open a school year has improved over the last couple of years, it's entirely, the credit entirely goes to the team that's with me here at this table tonight. They do really great work to stay ahead, to anticipate problems, and to work with people to find solutions so that, we can fix the systemic concerns that we've had about our ability to get a year up and running as quickly and efficiently as possible. That being said, as you heard, there are, issues here and there everywhere, and we will continue to work on those. And as we find things that, we're concerned about as trends of, ongoing things, then, there'll be the new targets, and we'll continue to try to improve. But I would say on the whole, we are pleased with the start of this school year. My only other item for tonight is just a quick update on the high school project. The design team is busy working on a submission for the MSBA. They had to take the schematic design and turn it actually into something more detailed. I think that submission is later this fall. Is that right, Mr. Furtado? November, there you go. So I've been attending a lot of meetings. Mr. Furtado's been attending a lot of meetings. Mr. Rooney has as well. Topics, things like school safety, the technology in the building, what the grounds are going to look like. There are various meetings that we're going to in which there are lots of design decisions being made, and we're doing our best to make sure that those decisions will serve the best interest of the community and the students that we're all here to educate. The progress that has been made on the building will be presented at this Wednesday's SBC meeting in this room. It's at 5:30. There'll be quite a lot of new information available at that, so anyone who's interested should certainly come and see that. And then later this fall, there will be a joint meeting between the school committee and the municipal council to get a more complete update on the entire project. There'll also be, I hope at that meeting, a virtual tour of the building, which will be quite impressive. So we're working on that. We want to keep the community informed of all the great news. I'm here to tell you it only gets more and more exciting. It's quite the project. So if there are no questions about that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Moving on, next on our agenda, we have approval of our minutes from our August 6th, 2018 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have our consent agenda, just one item tonight. Pursuant to the 2017-2018 Life Touch contract, subsection 12, motion to approve $858 to directly benefit the students of the Brennan Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to our subcommittee reports, we'll start with policy and personnel. Ms. Scales?
Thank you. Just one item, it's that policy, IKG, the homework policy, was approved and tabled back on August 6th and will be removed from the table and go into immediate effect. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Scales. Mr. Larson, Finance and Budget?
Finance and Budget Subcommittee met last week. We have 3 motions to bring forward. Most of this is just housekeeping. The first is a motion to approve a transfer of $11,500 from the CTE tuition line items to the Human Resources Contractual Services line.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Furtado, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, we got the final reports in from Bristol County and Tri-County. There was $13,000 left in the line, and we had a opportunity to expand the new software programs being used by HR, so we elected to do that.
Just one follow-up. Is it a one-time purchase or is this like a
Yeah,
renewable?
one-time.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $90,000 from the insurance line to the AHS electrical line.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Furtado, would you like to add anything there?
As the committee is aware, the city went out and bid on liability insurance at the end of last fiscal year, and we didn't have time at the approval of the new contract to make the budget adjustment, so we left the money in the insurance line and left the electrical line in the high school light. This money, we also have a circumstance where one of our solar farms didn't perform, and we may be getting some insurance money from that. And if we receive that insurance money, that will offset these funds to 2/3, about $60,000.
Thank you. Mr. Withers?
Was the new insurance $90,000 less than we were paying before?
Yes.
Can you elaborate more on why the farm did not perform?
Yeah, they had significant equipment issues that didn't. We were promised a start at actually a year ago, January. It actually didn't start until this past January. So for those 6 months where the system essentially didn't perform, they were insured, and they're going to reimburse us for what our expectation was.
So that's just to clarify, Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
that is a going to, not a maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we know what that amount will be?
$60,000.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And lastly, from time to time, invoices don't come in a proper way, so we actually have to submit them to the municipal council in order to get their approval to pay past year's invoices. So the last motion is entertain a motion to forward to the municipal council the request to approve the payments of invoices from FY 18 in the amount of $3,864.52.
So moved. Second?
I believe there's 10 small invoices that were included in everyone's packets. If anyone has a particular question about any of them.
These are paid out of our end-of-year position.
Ms. Gaddis.
I think it's important to point out this is not a request for the city to pay any of these bills. This is just a procedural step. We have the money in our budget remaining from last year. So it's not that we're asking the city for additional funds to cover these expenses by any means. The one question I did have just escaped me, so, thank you.
My only comment to yours is that if the city wanted to pay for it themselves, they're more than. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Next, we have open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, I don't see anyone here, so that'll close open forum. And that is the end of our agenda tonight, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
No.
Thank you.
First day of school.
October 29th, double check.
Our second meeting.
Christmas show. He's got a shot.
We did that in the meeting auditorium last time.
Yeah.